On the show today, Africa Development Bank launches the 2019 West Africa Economic Outlook Report. South Africa to get around $790 million in loans from BRICS Bank. Plus, French oil major Total launches full field production on Angola's Coambo. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on Business Incorporated. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. We get started now with the markets. And here in Africa, the Nigerian stock market, though yet to update its data, as at midday, it indicated a negative tilt. Now, the EGX 30 in Egypt was up 1.13%, while the JSC index was up marginally. Kenya closed in the green on Monday. In the Middle East, Dubai stock market rose at intraday, partly lifted by its largest listed real estate developer, Emma Properties, while Saudi Arabia's market slipped, weighed down by banks. The Dubai index continued its winning streak for a fourth straight session, rising 1.22%, with Emma Properties gaining 3.2%. In Qatar, the index added 0.46%, with Qatar National Bank, the largest bank by assets in the Middle East and Africa, rises 0.2%. Abu Dhabi's index was down 0.04%, while Saudi Arabia's index edged down 0.3%, with Saudi British Bank losing 1.7% as the stock traded ex-dividend. And in Europe, stocks were mixed in the morning after stronger than anticipated factory activity surveys from the US and China eased concerns over the global economy. Brexit is also on tap, and that's where I will start off my conversation with Janelle. Hello, Janelle. Well, after last night's brutal Brexit vote, investors seem to be shrugging off the Brexit chaos as the London FTSE index climbs. Do you think investors and traders are already beginning to discount a no-deal Brexit on April 12 or
at the pound, it's not too different of a picture. It's also yo-yoing and it's a bit down, but not by that much when you consider the chaos of the stalemate last night. But you know, this is a moving target. Something Brexit related happens every day, and the latest, of course, being that British lawmakers have published a piece of legislation that would force the government to seek a delay in Brexit to prevent a no-deal outcome. And you know, most of the investors that I talk to, most of them do think that a longer extension is turning out to be more likely. I think after the votes last night, it's become pretty clear that there is no plan, and the sensible thing to do would be to create more time in order to be able to formulate a plan. And the Bank of England seems also to be operating under this assumption that a longer extension will happen. It's extending its safety net for banks. Its so-called repo auction, that's where it hands banks cash in exchange for assets. And this was a program that was supposed to run, end by the end of April. Now it will run till the end of June, and it's aimed at preventing a liquidity crisis post-Brexit. Now, of course, the event that investors are bracing themselves for potentially could be a disruptive one in order to break the impasse that Parliament seems to find itself in. We're talking, of course, about general elections, like to potentially unseat Theresa May. But that would be a mere reshuffling of the cards, not necessarily a transformation into a winning hand, a further development in the process, and not at all the solution that everybody is looking for.
All right, another news on the wires today. Moody's Analytics chief economist Mark Zandi has warned that the global economy is highly likely to go into a recession if the US and China do not reach a trade deal within 3 months. Meantime, EU and US are having difficulties getting their own negotiations on track. Outline the issues and outlook for us.
Now, the issue seems to lie within the EU governments themselves. They're the ones who are struggling to find a consensus. Now, this is something that's been reported by Bloomberg. Apparently, tomorrow at a meeting of EU ambassadors, France is expected to withhold its approval to allow the European Commission to move forward in terms of in terms of resuming talks with Washington in order to bring down trade barriers. Now, the reported sticking points seem to be around climate and environment. Now, if you remember last year, the EU Commission, the European Commission had said that it would only pursue trade agreements with other countries that backed the Paris Climate Treaty. This is, of course, the treaty that wants to limit the rise in temperatures to just 2 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures. And it's also the treaty that Donald Trump famously pulled out of in 2017. The goal that the European Commission had in mind at that time was that it wanted to use its position as a trading power in order to induce participation in this treaty. But of course, that becomes a little harder when confronted with the reality that across from you in the negotiating table is the world's biggest importer. Now, a delay of this sort, a problem of this sort could result in a delay, could result in potential escalation in trade tensions. Donald Trump may make good on his threat to impose European tariffs on European cars, and Germany, of course, stands to be the most affected by that. Now, at a time where European economies seem to be seeing a bit of a slowdown, none of this is welcome news to them at all.
All right, let's look at the M&A market. ThyssenKrupp and Tata are hoping to finally gain European clearance for merging their steel operations. A package of measures was submitted last night with the aim of allaying antitrust concerns. Will this eventually work?
Investors seem to think that the likelihood of clearance has now become higher since news of those package of concessions became known. Now, just as a refresher, ThyssenKrupp and Tata want to merge their steel operations in Europe, but the European antitrust regulator had some concerns about this because they said that it would potentially make the resulting joint venture too dominant in the areas of steel production for food and aerosol can packaging, for steel for auto production, for example, and that they would have too much control over the pricing. Now, what Tata and ThyssenKrupp have reportedly agreed to do was to sell off two facilities in Belgium and Spain, and also potentially to let go of some of their steel, their packaging steel manufacturing activities in Europe. Now, ThyssenKrupp has not confirmed that these were the concessions that they made. All that he'd said was that there was a package of concessions submitted to the European Commission. As such, people are taking it as a sign that this merger is that much closer to clearing this hurdle.
All right, thank you very much for your time there, Janelle. Enjoy the rest of the day.